The New York Times once described Jordan Peterson as the most influential public intellectual in the Western world. However, since 12 Rules for Life became a bestseller, the controversial philosopher has outed himself as, well, a bit of a fraud. Here he is giving some nuggets of wisdom to Joe Rogan.
Hard to sort out. The climate change one is a weird one. So that
well, that's because there's no such thing as climate, right? Climate and everything are the same word. And that's what bothers me about the climate change types. It's like, this is something that bothers me about it technically. It's like, well, climate is about everything. So, okay. But your models aren't based on everything. Your models are based on warming. A set number of variables.
Yeah.
So that means you've reduced the variables, which are everything, to that set. Well, how did you decide which set of variables to include in the equation if it's about everything? And that's not just a criticism. That's like, if it's about everything, your models aren't right. Because your models do not and cannot model everything.
Jordan Peterson, the words climate and everything do not mean the same thing. They're different words with very different meanings, and that argument was completely ridiculous. We can get up the definition of climate for you. This is from the Oxford English Dictionary. The weather conditions prevailing in an area in general or over a long period. That's not the same definition as the definition for everything. And the weather conditions prevailing in an area in general over a long period of time are not all things, which is why you can model them. When predicting future weather patterns, scientists can identify inputs which they know will affect outcomes. If there is more carbon dioxide, temperatures will rise. If there are fewer reflective surfaces on the Earth, for example, if ice melts, temperatures will also rise. These are two relevant inputs which affect the climate, and so they feed into models which tend to make pretty good predictions. Jordan Peterson, though, thinks those predictions are impossible because actually a decent climate model would have to contain as its inputs everything. Absolutely everything, presumably including whether I decide to get drunk this weekend or which team wins the Premier League.
Jordan Peterson is an example of someone who has made a lot out of very, very little. Like he's successfully managed to sort of package, his status as just a sort of an academic, which, there are lots of academics in the world doing lots of different things. Being an academic of quite a specific discipline, and he's managed to package that into a very generalized sense of, I can just be taken seriously on any topic, no matter how patently ill-equipped I am to contribute to it. And it's very unacademic. It's very unscholarly of him. And he mixes this very powerful concoction of respectability, through wearing a suit in what looks like an underground bunker, his whiteness, his masculinity, these markers of I'm legitimate, I'm respectable, you should listen to me. He's packaged that with this kind of very boring nostalgia politics, which is very easy, low-hanging fruit, and this kind of self-victimizing narrative. Whilst he might be patently shameless, he's dangerous, and he's somehow powerful because of that very mix of sort of nostalgia, respectability, and touching on this sense of self-victimization. Because whilst he might not be the most extreme end of the culture war, he's not a sort of a Milo Yiannopoulos. He has a really important function in that space because he's essentially a kind of gateway drug to the alt-right, into the far right. He's a character who can take people from a sort of, curious position, a kind of somewhat down the road position, into someone who's sort of curious about how things in the world are changing, how the world around them is changing, how conversations around gender, around race, etc., are moving, and take them into some really dark places. And so even though whilst what he says might not sound as dangerous as a kind of Tommy Robinson type figure, because of his very strategic placement, which allows for both mass marketability, but also quite dark undercurrents, he's actually a very powerful figure in public discourse, which is how that happened. Honestly, historians in the future will be like, what the went on there? Like, because I can't answer.